Hi, this is Tatiana Moroz, and you're listening to Journalistic Revolution.
It is time to start talking to Ford Fischer. Ford, are you there?
Yep. Do you hear me?
We hear you loud and clear, sir.
Awesome.
So, first, introduce yourself and tell people what you do, and give us a little info about yourself.
Right. So, my name is Ford Fischer. I am one of two producers at newstoshare.com. Basically, we're independent correspondents in Washington, D.C. We're also students. But basically, we try to find stories around the D.C. area and report on them. We are also CNN iReport contributors. iReport is essentially a device that CNN has where you can contribute basically any story and have it shared around and stuff. And if successful, you can actually get it used by CNN either on their broadcasts or linked in their stories. In the case of today, last night we filmed Adam Kokesh, and I edited it sort of overnight and this morning, and it was hugely successful. It was shared 1,000 times, which is insane. Viewed a total of 2,000 times.
What was that, Trip?
I said, you're welcome.
Yep.
Me and Ford talked last weekend, and I'm just playing a little bit of shenanigans with him, but.
And everybody, I'll take the credit, Trip Pugh.
So anyway, you edited it. It's gotten over 1,000 shares, which is amazing, especially in 7 hours. As someone, as our group and producing videos, I'd cut off my pinky for 1,000 shares in 7 hours.
Yeah.
So where are we standing on getting this into CNN?
Right. So honestly, a lot of it has to do with relevance. So I wanted to get a huge view count, which I've gotten before the actual sentencing is happening. So by establishing a large view count, I'm very confident that assuming that CNN is reporting on Adam anyhow, that they'd probably link this in their story on him himself. A few months ago, I interviewed Jordan Belfort, a.k.a. the Wolf of Wall Street. I interviewed him about a month and a half before the movie about him came out, and it got not even a quarter of the views that Adam has today. But then when they actually ran a story about the film, they linked it, and then it made 10,000 views combined. So my hope is that having shared it around, we've got this initial layer of support for him. We've got a lot of viewership. It shows that the video means business. And then when they actually write a story about him, ideally that's when they would link to this and give him his chance to kind of speak for himself.
Yeah, I love that take on it, letting him speak for himself. No leading questions, no, trying to sum up what he's saying to move him along. You just let him kind of go at it free flow. So I want to dive into that a little bit. I want to talk about some of the things Adam said. Like first and foremost is the way he described his arrest.
No, I think you had it right.
But the way he described it as a very traumatic experience, as a reporter, and looking into the news, wouldn't you say that's true for all kidnappings throughout America?
Well, even if somebody is so-called rightfully being kidnapped, or if they had a victim full crime, say that cop who shot the kid in the movie theater, if he gets arrested, many people would obviously say that's a legitimate arrest. Regardless, it's a stressful thing, I think, for anybody to get arrested, whether they're on the right or the wrong side of the law, whatever their ideals. Nobody likes getting arrested. The circumstances by which Adam were arrested were particularly traumatizing. It was interesting because he was talking about it amidst talking about his military service, and I cut some stuff out, obviously, to get it down to a 6-minute length, but when he was describing the arrest, it sounded more traumatic than his time in Iraq. He was describing details about how it wasn't just him, it really hurt his girlfriend, and again, I kind of took that out for the video when I edited it, but he was describing that they threw a flashbang straight at his dog, and that they held them there in handcuffs just sitting down for 5 hours. So it was clearly very traumatizing to him, and kind of rightfully so.
Now, speaking of the correlation that he made with Iraq, he actually talked about his progression and how he still voluntarily decided to go to war and went and did combat in Fallujah, and the way that he admits to working with these people, these criminals, it was almost. I don't want to say shocking because we were all aware, but the way he was eloquent about it, I was impressed that he would even admit that he's made mistakes and imply that there's some sort of journey to be had. What was your take on that part of the conversation?
I thought it was interesting, and I think that the way that he framed it seemed that I think that his military service was actually a very integral part of his philosophy. It sounded like he kind of got back from the war and then sort of realized what kind of atrocity comes out of it. And that seemed to kind of rocket him into the Veterans Against the War, which seems to take up a large majority of the stuff that I've read about him. And I used a lot of photos of him protesting with Veterans Against the War, which even people outside of the Liberty Movement certainly support.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's like the one thing, that the left, the masses of the left-right paradigm agree on is nobody wants to go to war, but they disagree on how not to go to war.
Right.
Do you think that the difference in the traumatization between dealing with Iraq or Afghanistan or wherever versus dealing with an arrest in the police force is when you're at war against somebody, you have the ability to fight back. You can point a gun back. Whereas if you're being raided by police, all of a sudden you're handcuffed and you have no way of pointing a weapon back. You have no defense back at that. And I think that might be where the difference might be in being arrested in that manner versus, like you said, you felt like he was more traumatized by the arrest than dealing with what he dealt with over in a war zone. Right.
I think there's definitely a level of defenselessness to it. And obviously, by the way, if anybody grabs a gun while they're getting arrested, that wouldn't have gone well.
Exactly my point. I mean, there's no defense to that. You're almost defenseless.
The guns to your head before the guns to your head. Yeah. But to carry on about what he was discussing, what do you have to say about that journey?
How do you mean?
About how there's a progression for people to learn, and how he kind of implies that we need to be sympathetic to that, and realize that people have to grow. Because he said he described himself as libertarian since high school and didn't understand the philosophies behind it until he was much, much older.
Right, and I think that people definitely mature over time. So he's considered him a libertarian I guess if he was a senior in high school, that make him a libertarian for about 15 years. And people's ideologies change over time. And if they don't, then you probably have some kind of a problem if you're incapable of absorbing information and learning and adjusting your views based on that. So he really seems to be shaped by years of various experiences, from being, on the battlefield to coming back here, and it seems like America is really his home front to him as well. He kind of characterizes his civil disobedience as a war in a way itself.
And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free.
That scared the crap out of me. I was like, what link did I open up? Holy crap.
For a sec, I thought you just cut to a commercial. I was like, what? Really?
That was Tripp with his amazing timing. No, I agree. I think that this, and I've said this often, that this is a war. It's an ideological war as it stands right now. And there are many, many different fronts to it. There's civil disobedience, there's education, there's social networking, there is rallying, there's protesting. You know what I mean? There's many different ways. And I even still consider local politics an acceptable form of civil disobedience, like, being involved in local politics. I just kind of throw federal politics out the window at this point. But these different fronts, I mean, it's a war. It's an ideological war as it stands now. I mean, there's no shots being fired from our end, at least. So, what do you have to say about that and his take on that? This idea that civil disobedience is necessary for us to beat this educated slave paradigm that we live in today.
Well, I think that as well as one's ideologies change, I do think that one's methods change. He's been arrested. I believe it said he told me that he's been arrested 30 times, which I wrote in the description of that video. I believe he's only faced about 4 convictions or so, but and most of those haven't led to jail or anything like that, except for this most recent one. But I think that he seems to be taking also a change in how he's going to go about this stuff. He didn't. When we did this video, he was talking to the camera. He was describing his ideology, and he was not loading a shotgun and describing how he was going to start the next revolution or anything like that. Instead, he described his beliefs and then said, "Oh, and by the way, I've written the better part of a book, and also I plan on starting up my podcast as soon as I either get out of jail or if I don't go to jail." So it sounds like the civil disobedience kind of stuff might be softening down a little bit in favor of something that might be a little bit more traditional or more
philosophical, if you will.
Yeah, more philosophical. And I actually think that something like writing a book can really reach a lot more, masses. He was describing how it's being translated into enough languages that it covers 90% of the world. And additionally, it's also being translated into Klingon. And the joke he made to me is that it can be reached to an intergalactic audience for the first time, which I thought that was very funny. But
I'd like to cling on to one of those books.
Dun.
Sort of jokes aside, though, I actually think that there's something really strong about that, especially the fact that he is releasing it for free. He's asking for donations, but he's saying, anybody can read this book. It doesn't matter what your language is, and it doesn't matter, how much money you have. He really wants people to read this because he believes in it. And regardless of one's beliefs, I do think that anybody can kind of respect that, as he's certainly genuine if he's willing to put his ideas out there in that manner.
Agreed. And another point that I think that, we can all agree upon, no matter where you stand ideologically, philosophically, or politically, is he said one truism in that whole interview that really stuck out to me the most, and I'm almost sad to admit it.
Stand, man.
I'm almost sad to admit it, is if you're not having fun, you're not doing it right.
I liked that part. That was actually I liked what he said there. I took a lot of that to heart because we do have a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah, I mean, that's for those of you that don't know, I mean, that's me and Matt and Robert's hangout time for the most part. We let our kids play together, and then we laugh our asses off while doing our own thing for the cause of freedom and liberty. And I couldn't think of a better relationship than the three of us have, at least. To be able to do that. It's like we get to make our change in the world and have a great time doing it, and our kids get to, we all pretty much raise our kids pretty much the same, and they get to have that sort of community growing up with the 4 of them, and it's just all around a good thing.
Well, So I wanted to change gears a little bit here because I wanted to talk about this, and I want to know if you know about it there, Ford. Do you know what the Trivium method is?
No, actually, I can't say I do.
It's Robert's dead horse.
But no, the Trivium method is it's a method of thinking called grammar, logic, and rhetoric, and it's a way to think independently without necessarily other people's opinions or previously formed ideas. And versus classical trivium, which is our current educational system in the world today. And Adam brought up a point where he talked about the indoctrination of statism from birth. And in my research of the trivium, I find that the classical trivium, the modern education system that stems all the way back to ancient Greece, is designed to educate the slaves, literally in ancient Greece's times, just enough to be proficient producers, but still obedient to the city-state, versus the Trivium method, which the elite rulers use, which is independent thought and free thinking to control the masses. And the paradigm that he's talking about shifting, about awakening us to think for ourselves, is really a 1,000-year-old struggle of information since ancient Greece versus, the populace versus the elite.
Right, that's actually really interesting. I'm glad that you said that. I feel like I actually just learned something with that one.
You should come on Sunday nights when Josh is here.
Yeah, Robert's a lot more put together than I am.
There's your dead horse, man.
Giving me the finger.
With all of that sort of in mind, I definitely think that everybody kind of draws some sort of inspiration. I know Adam referenced, I forget who it was, but there was some economist that he had really liked it was a libertarian who he described as one of his influences, and he didn't really talk about it in the interview. But I feel like everybody kind of has, he likes the word status quo quite a bit. And then there's sort of the rebel writer, and that kind of creativity always has to come from somewhere. There's always some kind of an inspiration. I remember once reading All Art is Imitation, and I would definitely say that protesting in one direction or another, or writing, is certainly an art. And it's valuable, and it's definitely important, and it's definitely something that balances. If every single person on Earth were kind of, as you describe, a statist, then nobody would ever challenge that, and it can only go in a statist direction. But when you have somebody who has some level of creativity, some kind of influence that might be in the opposite direction, somebody who might say, actually, I kind of like Ayn Rand's stuff, or Ron Paul's ideology, or whatever it is, then you can kind of have a shift in the opposite direction. And then there's always the ability to kind of balance it, where even a statist should probably acknowledge that kind of balance will at least cause less super statism, that there's some level of checks and balances, which is sort of a concept that our country's been built on since the beginning.
Well, and I would like to draw this parallel, because I've talked about this a little bit, and I'll try to ask it as quickly as I can, guys. But I feel like that outcast mentality. I think a lot of us come from that outcast culture, that creative culture. I sort of align those two. An outcast culture is somebody that's creative, that thinks outside the box, that's not, isn't satisfied with the status quo from an early age. And so with that being said, I think that a lot of us get a lot of our garbage out, if you will, through that sort of creative mindset. Like the things that we do with JRev, and the videos everything that we do is from more of a creative mindset, just because it's like we're involved in these issues. However, we have to get it off our chest. It's a creative thing where it's like, we've got to do this.
I think it's just because we drank less fluoridated water.
Me too. It could be. You never know. But I think a lot of us come from that background, I guess, is my point. And Ford, I don't know. We talked once before, and I don't know your entire background or whatever. But you seem like somebody that was just involved in maybe writing stories or taking photographs. That sort of artistic, creative aspect of the deal. Would you agree with my assessment there?
Yeah, it's interesting because when I very initially got into media, it was actually about fiction stuff. I originally loved, horror things, essentially scary movies or whatever. And as I kind of went on with that, I actually started getting into some more, I guess, meaningful uses of media. I volunteered for an organization called Life Chronicles, where we film terminally ill cancer patients telling their life stories so that their wills essentially survive, and, their grandchildren can see them say hello, even if the grandchildren are not born yet or very young or whatever it is. And I guess I kind of found media to be something that can be used very meaningfully, whether it's fiction or whether it's news. And I think that it's such a powerful thing, as Adam has demonstrated, in the fact that he has two qualities that make him successful as an activist, which are that he's very well spoken and he has an ideology, but then the other one is that he's incredibly good at getting his word out kind of on the media with Adam versus the Man, and now with this book that he has coming out, and that combination of the creative thinking and the ideology, and then the ability to say it allows people to hear it.
Well, Ford, I know that you and I. Once again, we've talked. You've been involved in broadcast television and all that stuff. That stuff doesn't spring out of anywhere. A and B, it's like I want to make this perfectly clear to a lot of the listening audience as well, because a lot of the things that we do, this stuff doesn't spring out of anywhere. I mean, we put in tireless hours upon hours with what we do, and
for free.
Yeah, for free. You know what I mean? And we're all parents, so yes, our time is limited, and our resources are even that much more limited on top of it. But that stuff doesn't spring out of anywhere. There's a certain amount of talent that goes along with that. A, and B, there's a certain amount of time, and C, there's a certain amount of persistence that has to be achieved in order to make that profitable or prominent or on the forefront, on the front page. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting and important also to note that profit doesn't necessarily mean success. You can certainly create something, and it doesn't have to have monetizable value in order to be truly valuable. One's ideology is very important and can be kind of eternal, but your money is not what you're remembered for. It's what you've contributed. People will remember Bill Gates not as the richest man in the world, but as the creator of Microsoft.
That's a great point. And hopefully the people of this generation, the people of this movement, won't be remembered for, the actual protests, but for the new ideology that let me rephrase that. Actually, the old but now new ideology that all men are free and equal.
And again, I think it's interesting because this sort of movement none of this stuff comes out of nowhere. I think that there's always a counter movement to something that's too extreme, and then when you're kind of in the middle, then you always have there's always some kind of balance. Every kind of action has an equal and opposite reaction. I took a class, and the professor claimed that Ronald Reagan's conservatism was a result of, for instance, the hippie movement, and that he probably would have been less conservative if the hippies had been less hippie-ish. So the idea here being that
eat less granola.
The idea is that as the government becomes, more overbearing, larger, higher taxes or whatever, it's going to spit out more people like Adam who are spiteful of the government and want to fight it.
Well, that's the consensus that I feel in my community. When I'm out shopping and talking to, my community members, if you will, when I'm working at my second job and I'm talking to my fellow employees, the consensus I get is they're all angry. They just don't know what to be angry at anymore. They're not sure where they're supposed to place their anger, in the law, in the cop, in the president, in the system, they don't know what to do with it because they don't know anything else. They don't know that there's another option besides being controlled and regulated. And so I really see the paradigm shifting, but we need people like Adam, like Ron Paul, like Larkin Rose, like Derek J. Freeman, and hopefully like ourselves here at LMR and JRev, to help people think on their own, because that's really, at the end of the day, what the information aspect of the ideological front is we're not trying to tell you what to think. I don't want you to think that 9/11 was an inside job. I don't want you to think that the federal government needs to fall tomorrow. I don't want you to think that taxers are evil. I want you to tell me what you think and why.
Mm-hmm. And again, I think that it has to do with being educated kind of on what exactly is happening. And there's something important about people who, for instance, spoke out about the police that beat the homeless man to death, Kelly Thomas.
Thomas Kelly, yeah.
For instance, that there would be, granted, he got off not guilty, so it sounds like there's no justice for him. But what I was going to say on that was that nobody would know about him if it weren't for social media and people talking about it. Nobody would have an opinion on the case if not a single person was talking about this. And it has a lot to do with technology, where everybody can just share everything kind of on the Facebook. Someone like Adam would probably be forgotten by history if he existed in a time other than now. And same with Kelly Thomas. He was a homeless man that was beaten to death by police. If that had happened 70 years ago, and I'm sure it has happened to people 70 years ago, they are absolutely forgotten in time. But the imprint that this man leaves is one, but both Adam and Kelly Thomas are ones that can be remembered forever, even after they're dead. Adam could drop dead tomorrow, and everything he said would still be on the internet. And people would still be able to use it. And that's a beautiful tool for the procreation of ideas.
Hence the reason why Primus is timeless.
No, you had to get a Primus plug in there. Rage Against the Machine. But so, no, I completely agree, because that's one place that me and Adam philosophically agree, is that technology can be used as a tool to help facilitate the shift in the paradigm. So I really agree with that. I don't necessarily agree that it should be our main tool, but as far as networking goes and everything like that, but nothing, I think, beats a conversation between one human being and another. And to extrapolate on your point, you're absolutely right. We've seen this going back as far as Brandon Robb. No one would have heard about Brandon Robb if it wasn't for people like Adam and other people, alternative media sources talking about him and Facebook, and the police brutality. I mean, you got Cop Block working. You have Cop Watch. You have innocentdown.org. You have all these sites now dedicated to trying to keep these people accountable at the very least, and get rid of them altogether at the best case scenario. And this is all because of technology in the information age.
Right, and again, that goes to the very way that I shared this, this video that I did with Adam. It was posted on the CNN iReports, where you can post anything to basically CNN's website. And granted, it's unvetted, which means at this exact moment, CNN has not acknowledged it personally, although I hope that they will. But you have the ability to just share something like that, and there's a phenomenal amount of mobility that people who believe in something can have, and it really, really speaks to that kind of strength. When I'm looking down, I've never had it say K next to the shares. I've never gotten into the 4 digits where they abbreviate it by saying 1K. It's always been something hundred. So they definitely succeeded on that one, and I know Tripp was saying that was all him. I'm sure he shared it 1,000 times and found 1,000 people that would take it.
That's our take the credit trip right there, man.
Dude, hey man, we got that shit. We hooked it up. It's all good.
Well,
like we did the Planners Week, that Planners Week article. Well, the thing is like let's we're alternative media. Let's do a little tit for tat here as far as the CNN crowd is concerned. It's like JG Vibes that wrote the article that I did with the Planners Week with me and Brandon, the interview that I did with him. That's been shared 6,000 times already since the beginning of the year, and that's incredible to me as well. I'm ecstatic about something like that, but. The fact is that you have to sort of push that onto the mainstream. And like, I'm just wanting the insight, because we deal with something completely different than that. You know what I mean? So I'm very interested in that tit for tat and what works, because you seem to be interested in the same things that we're interested in. However, that more reach out to mainstream, it seems like you've really, really got to fight a lot harder for your ideals to make it that way, instead of hey, there's already a market for this, and there's people. I hate to say it like that, like a market for that, but there's people that are naturally interested in this type of material.
Right, and again, I think that it's interesting or important as a reporter to object multiple sides of a story, and I think that when one is underrepresented, as we were saying about compensation or even overcompensation, it's important for somebody else, and not to kind of heroize myself, but in general in the movement or any movement really, to give the opposite side to talk about it. You know, in say the 60s, you know, civil rights movement, I'm sure there were many newspapers who were describing it as, oh, the blacks are riling up the everything, and you know they're kind of ruining everything, and they have some way of twisting it, and that's when it becomes really important for the oppressed group to shout out and let their own voice be heard. So with many people reporting on Adam negatively, my reason for doing this was to give him a voice. And right now, at 2,000 views in 7 hours, and we still have 2 more days before his sentencing, I believe that his voice will be heard.
That is awesome. And so I want to end this with a final question. I want to give you your voice. Why did Adam's case and his activism call to you for you to do this video and for you to want to bring this mainstream and once again give everybody the information of where they can find you and the video?
All right.
He's not going to say what he says personally, and I don't care. Like, Ford, I don't know. I wasn't that open with you. But, look, we run things a little bit looser over here, and I understand you're fully within your right to protect anything. Don't let Robert pressure you. I don't.
No, that's fine. I have an answer for it.
I'm just being a dick, but...
Right. No, okay. So, to be really, really perfectly honest, the way I originally found out about Adam, and this was before the shotgun thing, the way I originally found out about him was just kind of searching random stuff on the internet. I was kind of just interested in what does libertarian mean to people. I had actually just started reading Atlas Shrugged. My girlfriend, shout out to Caitlin, is a very philosophical libertarian, and she encouraged me to read the book. I have not read the whole thing yet, sorry. But I was interested in seeing, is there anybody else that's still carrying this on? And I think I Googled something to the effect of, like, modern libertarian. And that was sort of how I came across him. And I kind of have been following him since then because I found him very interesting for the fact that his activism is so outspoken. There are so many people who talk about it. And even someone like Ron Paul isn't out on Freedom Plaza loading a shotgun. Right. So even the people that are demonstrating these things as opposed to just setting up a little blog or something are not making efforts quite like his. He really breaks into the realm of civil disobedience in a way that's just I just find it to be a real outlier. And I think that's where I became interested in him because of his the ways that he goes about his ideology and he's so brave about it, given that after he's arrested at the White House and then he does the shotgun thing. So he really keeps going with it because he believes in it. And I think that was where I was interested in him more almost for his methods than the actual ideologies themselves. And of course the enormous internet presence. It would be nearly impossible to go through every video he's done. He has so much content that it's just impossible to absorb all of it. So you really, I was able to look at more and more stuff, and he really became more and more interesting as I went through it.
That's awesome. And where can everybody find this video and other videos that you've done, like with the Wolf of Wall Street?
Right. So if you go to CNN or ireport.cnn.com and my name is Ford Fischer, FORD, FISCHER, no spaces. All of my iReports are on there. You can also find all of my content at news2share.com, NEW2 share, SHARE.com. And that's basically our website for compiling all of Trey and my works. And we're looking to report more on kind of the liberty movement as the year continues. That's
awesome. Thank you so much for coming on, man, and talking to about this. This is I was really excited about this interview because I thought not only was there a lot of good content in the video you did about Adam, but when I was looking into your other stuff, I was like, this guy is going somewhere because he's looking in the right spots, man. And I thank you again for coming on.
Yeah, you're welcome. No problem.
All right. That was Ford Fischer, everybody. You can find him, like he said, at I something.
News to share.
Holy hell, Robert.
I'm doing several things at a time.
And I'm the bad one, too. Like, I'm not okay right now, and I'm still on top of it. What's going on?
I think he's already left the chat room. I was gonna tell him to post his link in the chat room for people.
I have it. I'll post it here in a minute after we go to break.
News, the number 2, to share. News to share.
Absolutely. All right. We are going to play Police State by Rebel Inc. I thought I'd go a little with the show tonight.
Hey, no, that's perfect for the next segment. When we come back, we'll be discussing police brutality in the last 15 days.